everyone, we are joined with Jason Moscovici from Robic. Jason, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
And so just to begin, tell us a bit about what you do.
In a nutshell, I basically run the Cannabis group over at Robic. We're a full-service intellectual property firm out of Montreal with an office in Quebec. We basically have been feeding the space for a good 6 years now, really delving into their untangling their intellectual property concerns with an eye to compliance as well. Because with with an industry that's as regulated as the cannabis industry, there's some strategies that are applicable to how to put a value to IP and also how to basically protect your IP.
Really interesting. There's always a lot of talk in the industry about IP and different opportunities that exist within that space. What are you seeing in terms of IP trends and what different companies are pursuing?
Right. So right now we are basically in the midst of the cannabis edibles sort of rollout. So extraction is king right now. Technologies that revolve around whether it's full spectrum or not. Extractions, basically machines used for the purpose of extractions, the methods for extractions, and the final product itself. Right now is basically what we're hearing as being like the top level of in terms of interest. But there's a lot of trickle down from there too. Like for example, if you're going to take your extract, you're going to transform it. Let's take an oil, for example. You're going to put that in a capsule. Well, there's the capsule itself that can generate some IP, but also, the machine that takes the capsule and then takes the oil and puts it together, that can also generate a lot of innovation there too. And in that regard, actually, what I think is like the next steps is looking to see what IP is being generated and actually bring it back to more traditional industries. So it's not so much developing a cannabis-specific innovation or invention, but also to take that and be like, well, does this now have applications in traditional industries? And then that's how I think sort of a proper value portfolio is sort of put together. Yeah.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. And as you mentioned, extraction is the real hot thing right now, and the industry kind of moves in waves. What do you think that next wave is in terms of intellectual property?
Basically, it's kind of where it started too. I think we're going to go back to novel drug forms. If we want to talk like real nerdy intellectual property, I think we're going to start to see some novel drug forms, what we call can call cannabis health products and things like that. More on the pharma side, I think there's basically a need. Everyone's talking about that aspect of the industry as being sort of the next step. I mean, what we're hearing is, well, we need to do the research to get to intimately know the composition of, for example, the plant, and then how that interacts, and then from there, what kind of products can come from it. So I think that's definitely going to be a driver for innovation in the future, which is interesting because that's kind of how some of this started. I also kind of think that, and I'm a believer too. I think on the packaging side too, we're going to start to see some things sort of come up. And I mean, I can talk about lighting, irrigation, and soil compositions too, because anything that's dealing with like the cultivation sort of everything that revolves around it also becomes of interest. But I think just to really put my nail in the head, especially internationally, when you're kind of looking the way the cannabis industry is developing internationally, people are really looking at this at an idea from like a novel food or novel drug perspective. Yeah,
and on that point, you do a lot of work internationally yourself, I know. And so what are you seeing when it comes to cannabis in places like Europe, like Australia, and where do you think that's going to go in the next year?
Yeah, I think that's anyone's guess, but one thing's for sure, I think it's going to go in a direction that is not where Canada, I think, saw it going, let's say a couple of years ago. From what I'm seeing, there is this idea of a lack of harmonization. Like in Europe, it's basically a medical forward market. So I think that brings along all the standards and requirements that go with it, and in Canada, we went about it in a different way. I guess Australia is going to be a real good or an interesting it's interesting to kind of look at that under the microscope, because I find Australia a very good sort of amalgamation between a whole bunch of systems together, So I guess it just depends how their eventual rec system or rollout happens. But yeah, definitely medical moving forward.
Is there a market that excites you the most internationally?
It's funny because everyone's expecting me to say basically edibles or beverages, but I actually kind of think that, especially on the medical side as well, I think concentrates and how that can be used, for example, novel delivery forms. Let's say someone who uses a transdermal patch or some sort of inhaler and so on. I think seeing that interface develop, I find it very, very interesting right now. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Jason. This was a great conversation. Really appreciate you taking the time.
No problem. Always great to chat. See you later.
Thank you.